Welcome everybody to another edition of me streaming some Rust. We got an exciting one for today. I'm hoping that it's going to be about an hour and a half long, so not too long. Something for everybody on this beautiful Friday afternoon, at least where I am. Hello to everybody out there. Today what we're going to do is just kind of finish up what we started on the last stream. So I'm going to do a quick recap of what we did there. And then this time we're going to finish it up and hopefully get it working. We'll see how far we get. Hopefully by the end of the stream today it will be complete. And yes, indeed, I do not have a plant growing out of my head this time around, so that's good. I hope that the background is good for everybody, and that you don't see anything growing out of my head like you might have seen in the last stream. All right, cool. So I'm going to switch over to the browser real quick, and we'll talk about what we did last time. Here's for anybody who's not aware, if you can go on YouTube and watch the first part of the stream. Basically what we are doing is connected to this project right here. Let me blow it up for you a little bit. github.com/microsoft/WinRT RS. So in the last stream we kind of went through and talked about what the WinRT RS project is all about. Basically, the way that you can think about it is that WinRT is the Windows runtime. It's basically like a way of exposing APIs in Windows that is in many ways language agnostic. And so, for instance, C# uses this, C++ uses this, JavaScript, VB uses it as well. As a way to call Windows APIs, but I mean it's not necessarily just for exposing Windows APIs. You can also create your own APIs as well, and it's a way to do that in a way that kind of works in a language agnostic way. And that's kind of all I'll be saying about it today. If you want to learn more, feel free to ask questions, and of course we went over it in a bit more detail in the previous stream. But specifically what we're trying to do is, as you can see here in this code, we are importing some APIs, and specifically this module right here, windows.foundation. But the dependency that's coming from is this NuGet package. And so the way that it normally works, or that it's worked up until relatively recently, is this dependencies that you have right here. You would specify OS, and it would know on Windows there's a very specific place where this WinRT metadata that describes these APIs lives. And it would go and find that metadata and then look for the modules that you specify here. And we still want to support that, obviously, but it doesn't have to necessarily come hard-coded on your machine. You can also have modules that exist, third-party modules that exist somewhere else. And for reasons that are still not 100% clear to me, and this is fine. Yeah, I don't want to disparage the project at all. It's the metadata is usually stored in NuGet packages, which kind of from the history of the project makes a lot of sense. It's a bit weird once you expand it out to a lot of languages, but that's fine. For those that don't know, NuGet is the .NET kind of equivalent of Cargo or of crates.io. It's kind of the package management system, or where packages are stored. And so what we want to do is go ahead and add NuGet support to this. And I won't show this today. I've already done it in another pull request, but we can now say that this module we're looking for is exposed in this NuGet package. And this knows to go and look in a specific place in our project. It's actually in the target file or target directory, in a directory called NuGet. That it should find a folder called microsoft.windows.stk.contracts, and it will find all the metadata that it needs to create this API. So that's all well and good. That's not what we worked on last time. What we worked on last time is this project, which I just pushed up to GitHub. Sorry about that. cargo NuGet, and what it does is it goes out and talks to the NuGet.org. Let's take a look at that, NuGet.org. And NuGet.org is kind of the crates.io equivalent for NuGet. And it goes ahead and downloads NuGet packages. And so far, what it does is it downloads the NuGet packages, and that's basically about it. So what we're going to be doing today is kind of finishing up the process of opening up the NuGet package, finding the metadata inside of the NuGet package, and then putting it in the place that we expect it to be, which is in the target folder in this NuGet folder inside of the target folder. And if we have time, what I would love to do is, since the WinRT RS stuff is working, we can go ahead and kind of see if a full loop works, where we use this tool to download a NuGet package, it puts it in the right place, and then we use WinRT RS to kind of read those NuGet packages, and the whole loop is kind of completed. All right. Let's see. Any questions from the chat? Doesn't look like it. So yeah, chat. Feel free to throw any questions in there as they might come up. And before we get started, I wanted to show some code that I wrote between now and last time. The code was looking a little messy, and I had a little bit of free time last week, which seems very weird to me now, considering that I have almost no free time. This week has been very, very busy, but that's all good. And what I did was I went ahead and cleaned up some of the code that we have here. And so I'd like to take a little look at that, and we can look at the diff that we have before and after. So the first thing I want to look at is that we had this, when we install a NuGet package, what we did was before we were reading the cargo TOML file and parsing the manifest and finding this section in our manifest that specified our NuGet packages, and then went ahead and downloaded them. And now I've kind of just put that into this install impulse, so we call perform on it just because it looks nicer. But you'll see here that I'm returning my kind of own error result here, which there's a couple of them. It's not too involved, but there's like the no cargo TOML error for when there isn't a cargo.toml file that we can find, download error of some sort, which just contains some sort of boxed error object. So it could be really anything that implements standard error. This is a common pattern, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, to box up a dynamic error. So any error, anything that implements standard error can go into here, and that's a nice way of just kind of saying I have some sort of error that is related to downloading, and I'm going to keep it in here. If we didn't box it, then we would have to make error generic over some error type, and that's just can lead to all kinds of ergonomic messes and stuff like that. Doesn't usually work. This is a nice pattern to do that. And the last one is a malformed manifest. Hello there. Hello into chat. Good to see you there. So I cleaned that up and kind of just made sure that everything was returning a result when it could error. Clean this up as well. Instead of doing these unwraps, I'm basically calling and then on these optional values, which basically says, okay, if the optional value is there, yield it to me, and I expect to find another optional value, and it just all packages it up into an option here that we can look at and see if we got the table inside of our cargo manifest file. Then this is what we do, and hopefully, I mean, if you didn't watch the last stream, this might not be super clear what's going on here, but in general, what we're doing is reading a cargo.toml file, finding a section in that cargo.toml file that describes our NuGet packages. Then down here, we form our dependencies. So we describe our dependencies, the name of it, the version of it, and then we go ahead and download those. So we use the surf library to download from some URL that in the package exists at these kind of well-formed URLs on NuGet. We get the bytes here, and then we return back the bytes. And watch the last stream to see kind of how this all worked out. Cool. Any questions about the changes that were made here, particularly around error handling or anything like that? If not, then we will get started trying to figure out what our next steps are. And hallo, na? Guten Tag. Hope everybody in Germany is doing well. And of course, those not in Germany, I hope you're doing well as well. Okay, so I don't see, I don't see any questions coming from chat, so we'll go ahead and get started with the activity for the day. So I'm just going to open it up in not cargo, sorry, code. Open this up. Whoa. And then we can get started. So we need to figure out exactly what we're going to do here. And if we look at the top here, we get our dependencies, but we don't actually do anything with them. So we get the dependencies, we download the dependencies. If we look at download dependencies here, it returns back a vector of this kind of tuple of dependency to the bytes that make up that dependency. And what we should remember about NuGet packages that we mentioned last time is that NuGet packages are just zip files at the end of the day. So they're just zip files with, instead of .zip at the end, it's like .NuGet spec or whatever on it. And so really we're dealing with zip files here, and we need to unzip them and take a look at the directory structure inside. So I think that's the first thing that we're going to be doing today, is downloading the NuGet dependencies and then unzipping them and taking a look at what's inside. Cool. So up here we've called download dependencies. We do a question mark here, so if there's an error, we'll just pop out of perform quickly. So then this will be our downloaded deps here. And for now, I think what I'm going to do is loop through each of these downloaded deps one at a time and unzip them. So we have the dependency itself, so that describes the dependency, its name and its version. And the zipped bytes. Oops. Downloaded deps. Cool. And so now the decision we need to make is how are we going to go ahead and unzip these things. And so I was looking around online to see if there's any crates for doing zip files, and I found this one here, which unfortunately on the README in the repository it says, like, it's here. Let's take a look. It says that it's no longer maintained. Unfortunately, due to a lack of interest, it's no longer maintained. It's a bit strange though, because that README was updated 6 months ago, and there's been 2 versions since then. So it seems like it's kind of in a half-maintained state right now, and it seems to be a widely used crate. So I think it's fine to use it for now, but hopefully somebody takes over maintenance of this so that it continued to be trusted and used in the future. I offered my services. I'd be happy to take it over. It looks like a small but useful crate, so hopefully that happens. But for now, since this isn't too serious of a project, I think it's totally fine to go ahead and use that. So we're going to use this for dealing with our zip files. So I'm just going to copy this over here, and I like to do this where we just say 0.5 because it will by default, usually if it can, pick the latest version. And so now we can use this zip crate to go ahead and unzip our zipped files, our NuGet files then. So we need to look at the repository documentation real quick to see how we use this. And it seems like there's a read and write module inside of here, so we're probably going to want to use the read one. And if we look at the read one here, it has an example where it's just unzipping a zeroed out array of bytes, which is a bit funny of an example, but that's fine. And we pass in that reader in here, and then we're looping over it. And so zip files, when you unzip them, it gives you an archive with a kind of a listing of directories. So this zip by index gets a contained file by its index, so we can just kind of loop over them. Strangely, and one thing, if I were to take over, or at least be confident that pull requests were being accepted on this crate, I would definitely go ahead and implement an iterator over the files here. But it doesn't seem that they have an iterator. They have an iterator of file names, but it doesn't seem like they have an iterator of the files themselves inside of the which is definitely a shame. So some opportunity to contribute back, but of course I would want to see that the maintainer is actually maintaining the thing. Okay, so enough talking. Let's get this done here. We're basically going to want to do what they're doing here. We have a vector of bytes here, and as far as I'm aware, we need something that implements read and seek. Sorry, so that's something that's readable and that's seekable. And if we look at things that implement IO read down here, we can see what these things are, blah blah blah. And if we search in here for vec, vec does not implement read, because the vector has nothing inside of it that allows you to keep track of how much you've read and stuff like that. So we need something on top of it to be able to turn our vector into something that implements read. And usually, what you could do for that is we could use this right here. Read is implemented for a slice of U8s, which we can easily turn our vector into a slice of U8s. So that would work. But the other thing that zip archive requires is that it is seek. And if we go down to what seek is implemented here, you'll notice that the byte slice does not implement seek. So that wouldn't work. So what would work? What is both read and seek? This buff reader here should work, and that's what the example is using. So a buff reader is just a reader that keeps a kind of a buffer of results inside of it. And you'll notice that buff reader was seek, and it's also read as well, which makes sense. All right. Let's see here. So we need to go ahead and going around here. We could also use cursor here. Cursor is another thing, and probably we probably don't need buff reader because buff reader is a bit of overkill. Buff reader is good when you're doing kind of a lot of reads and you want to kind of bring a bunch of stuff in. You're doing a lot of small reads. You can use buff reader to kind of bring in a big chunk of the thing and then allow the thing to do small reads in that in-memory buffer that it has. So think of a file. You don't want to continually call read on a file. That's quite expensive to continually call these operating system APIs. So what you would do is wrap that thing in a buff read, and that would basically do one big old read of the file bring it into memory, and then the actual reading would be from the buffer instead of the underlying file. But we don't really need that. Cursor is probably a better choice. Where is cursor? Cursor is here. So for anything that can be, it's a bit small. Cursor for anything that can be referenced as a slice of U8s is a cursor, and that's read. And then cursor is also seek. So let's do that instead. That's a good choice. So we'll just copy this here. And we didn't call it buff, we called it zip bytes here. And now we have our reader, and of course going back here we can get our zip archive. So with our error handling message, we are not handling, we are looking specifically for an error type, or our error type here, and we don't have any way of transforming from the error that zip archive new returns to our error type. And zip, this is a zip result, so it's a zip error of some sort. I think for now what I'll just do is like other. So this is just going to be a catch-all, and it's just going to take a box done. So it's just going to be like, I got some other error. It's not the best thing to do, but for now, we can do this just to kind of catch other errors. And of course we need, I didn't mention this, I don't think. I'm using this error from David Tolnay, which allows you to do kind of nice custom errors. So it gives you a way of displaying error messages and stuff like that. So we'll just say, there was some other error. And maybe we can do this. No? Let's see if it complains about this. So it should be fine. And then we can map our error, map error, error, other. Oh, and we need to box the thing, yeah. There are other ways to handle this that are a bit nicer, but I just wanted to show kind of the low-level one. So we're boxing our error, putting it in this other error thing here, and now we can use our question mark to bubble it out. So it's going to be an other error, some other error. Great. So we have a reader, we have our zip archive, and now we can loop through our zip archive. So we have this here, and again we have to do this interesting for loop here. That's a bit old-fashioned kind of C-style for loop, at least where we're going by index here. So we get the zip, we get its length, we're going through from 0 to the length, and then we're getting the zip by its index, and we assume that it's there. And we'll just do this this one for now. We'll go ahead and print out the file name. Get rid of some of these real quick. So let's go ahead and run this. It's downloading all the, or compiling our new dependency that we have there. Oh, and we need, I forgot what we're actually requiring people to cargo, install, and then should have looked at this code. Oh yeah, it goes to the cargo.toml. Okay, so cargo run install. So invalid archive could not find central directory end. Interesting. So it looks like we are successfully downloading the archive, but then we are not able to unzip it. which happens. It's happening here. So we're trying to create the archive, and we get an error, and we can see that down below here, which is sort of being covered by my face, but hopefully you can see there that we're getting some kind of invalid archive error here. So I'm not sure why. Not sure why this is an invalid archive. Let's see, in our cargo.toml, what are we reading? Win2D UWP. If we go here, this is the thing that we're trying to download right here. And if I go ahead and just open this up, and it will download it. Let me just, I'm going to open that, and I'm going to move it over here. So this is the actual NuGet package that we get. And I'm curious if we kind of overtake our main function here instead of doing this whole jazz real quick. I'm going to go ahead and just moving up and down here where I got lost in the code real quick. Okay, this one here. I'm going to do this whole dance right here, just with a local file to see how that's working. And so instead of getting the zip bytes, which we obviously don't have, we're not downloading it, we want to do standard fs file open. Then I can just copy the name here. Oops. So we're going to read this file locally. And instead of doing this whole map error jazz here, we're again going to unwrap. We're just going to blow up if anything goes wrong. And this, so now instead of downloading, we're going to read it locally and then print it out, just to see if we're getting it to work right. Let me bring this up a little bit. Okay, so that's working. Interesting, interesting, interesting. So when we have the file, when we have this zip archive locally, it's working correctly. But it seems like whatever we're getting when we download it through surf here, it is not ending up correctly. This, by the way, is looking good. This is all the files and stuff like that inside of our zip archive, which is great. And it looks like Chad is saying, can we print out the first few bytes to see if the magic number is correct? And what they're referring to is that, as with most files, the beginning of the file usually begins with some sort of magic number. That kind of is a hint to whoever's looking at it, like, hey, I am this type of file, so that you don't have to like do very much digging to figure out what kind of file it is. You can just look at the first few files. Yeah, we certainly can go ahead and do that and see. I just want to see if there's anything obvious here. Another thing we can do is if we copy this link and then come back here and curl it. There. That's probably what it is. So we're probably getting this back, this HTML, which is, if we, not X, what is it? There we go. You can see it's a 302. And so what I'm pretty sure is the case is that surf is not following redirects by default. And so we're actually, Chad is saying it's packages, not package. Am I getting a 404? Is that really what it is? Maybe looks like chat. You see, this is why you should do all your programming when somebody is watching you, because you have somebody to pair program with at all times, or you know, however many people are watching right now are pair programming with me. So that's another thing. I am still not sure if it will work, but we can try now. So we've changed package to packages because the URL was wrong. And so if we go ahead and run it now, will it work? No. So I think if we go ahead and get the body bytes, and let's just go ahead and do here when we get the body bytes, I'm just curious to see what we're going to call string from UTF-8, or better yet, stir from UTF-8 and pass in our bytes. Bytes. So is it not? Where is it? Don't tell me, chat. Don't tell me. I'm going to find it from. So what we want to do is turn these bytes into a string. Oh, I think I have to say standard stir. Yeah, there we go. And unwrap. So we're going to print out the bytes as a string, because presumably it's HTML that we're getting. So we should be able to see. Yes, it is HTML. It's a big old thing, HTML. So a thing that we should have done a long time ago is done something like if res.status does not equal 200, then return error. Error. Download error. Do I really want to? I'll just do. I think I can do this. Anyhow is the other half of this error for error handling, and I think I could just pass a string and it will box it up for me. What did I want to say here? Not 200 response. Do I not have anyhow? I don't. Let's get anyhow in here. So a recommendation for those who are looking into error handling, checking out this error and anyhow, which are by the same person and are kind of the two sides of the same coin. This error is for creating errors and anyhow is for kind of like handling errors then, or propagating errors. Giving those a look is probably a good thing to do. So now we're using anyhow, and we can now, nice thing is anyhow comes with this macro that allows you to just put strings in there and it will do the dance of actually creating an error object out of it and boxing it for you, so you can use it anywhere that a box error is needed, which is really great. And what I imagine, what I imagine here is that we're going to see this not 200, oh, is it not working? We do have to call into. My screen is about to turn off. This stream is going very well today. Yeah. So great. And I wonder, and anyhow, can you do this? I'm also fairly new to anyhow, so curious if that works. Looks like it. So we can see what the status actually was. 404. So we must be calling the wrong what is the actual URL that we're printing out? Sorry about this. The good old print line debugging here. Well, let's just see what yeah, that is 404. If we look at this, oops, I want to copy the link to take a look at it. Oh, it is package. It is, so that was right. It was package. That was correct, and probably what we're going to see now is that it's a 302, so it's a redirect. But at least we got better error handling now, which is good. Great. Yeah, 302. So we need to follow that redirect basically, and I'm not sure how to do that in Surf. I've never done that. Let's take a look. If we have to read the HTML and do it, or if there's any. Let's see if they have any kind of helpers there. Go to the latest version. Oh, that's actually not. We're not using that. Redirect. Nope. Well, that's unfortunate. So it looks like we're going to have to, oh, great, chat. I've got my first spammers. This is good. I don't know how to handle spammers, so don't tell the spammers that. I can't. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we have to go ahead and actually follow the redirect that we're getting. Ourselves, which is fun. Trying to remember for HTTP 302 redirects. Do I have to? Let me ban these users real quick. I'm trying to think if I have to read the HTML or if it comes with a header. Does anybody know? URL is in the location header. Okay, cool. Thank you. So there's a location header that we can that we should be able to find. So we could probably turn this into a match on status and say that if it is one that we don't handle, we just do this. And if it's a 200, we're good. And if it's a 302, we need to do something else instead. We need to get the res.headers, which headers here returns a headers and get, and we can get the key here, and the key will be location header. Is it called location header? Location header. No, it's just location. Okay. Great. Location. I do not want to like it when it reformats like that. So let header equal, and for now, let's just go ahead and unwrap. We can handle that a bit better later on. So then we get the header, and we're going to I guess we should be able to redirect URL we should be able to just call it like this. And wait, what is it complaining about here? Status returns a status code dot. Can I turn? Does that work? Cool. So we're just turning it into U16s. That's interesting. We're dropping the headers here. Probably because Git just borrows it. So we need to hold on to that for a while. All right, and let's unwrap for real quick. And, oh wait, res is already mutable, so we can then, we'll probably want to eventually break this out so that we can kind of recurse and handle, have like a response handler that kind of does the same thing, because we presumably want to follow even more redirects if there is, but for now, let's just do this. Sorry, not that. Let's just replace res like that. And real quick, just to, this is kind of quick and dirty, but I'm just gonna assert that after one redirect, we get a 200. And let's see if that works. Great, UTF-8 error. So we are still trying to look at our body as a string, which a zip file is most definitely not a valid string. So that is a good sign. That is not, it's not HTML, or at least not UTF-8 HTML. Let's see. Yay! It works. This is awesome. So we have done a good job, team. Just to recap real quick what we did, we found out that calling that URL was actually returning a 302. We were looking at we went down a path where we thought that the URL was wrong. It turns out that it wasn't. We were getting some HTML that was the 404 page. But then once we figured out really it was a 302, all we had to do then was get the headers. We have to, by the way, have headers as its own separate variable here, because when you call get, you're getting a reference into the header struct. And so if you were to do res.headers.get, the call to headers creates a new headers struct, but then you call get on it, you try it, you get a pointer into that struct, and at the end of the line, the temporary variable where headers is located gets dropped, and so you would end up with a pointer to something that had just been dropped. So we have to make sure that headers lives until we're done getting this redirect URL, which is basically right around here. We get the redirect URL from the location header. We call surf get. We wait. We just do some nasty stuff to say it's gotta work this time, or we're gonna blow up. We can clean that up later on. And with that, the response then returns us the right body bytes, and it turns out that so this should work. There's a question in chat: is there an alternative to surf that handles redirects? I'm not even sure that surf doesn't handle redirects. I just couldn't find it real quick. Hyper does not by default. I remember reading that recently, but yeah, there's something where you can add. There's something that you can add to it that where it will do it. I think somebody was complaining that Hyper doesn't handle redirects by default. For something like Surf, which is meant, like Hyper is fairly low level. Surf is definitely meant to be a higher level abstraction than Hyper, even though it doesn't run on Hyper. It could, or maybe there's a fork out there that does. Anyway. Surf is supposed to be higher level than Hyper. Surf, I think, absolutely should follow redirects. but maybe it's just not been implemented. Another way to get involved in the community is to see if that's implemented in Surf, and then if it's not, go ahead and implement it. It's not too hard to do. So, all right, great. So where are we then? We are up here, where we have downloaded the deps. We put the bytes of our zip file into a cursor so that it's readable. We go through we unarchive it and then get each file in turn, which is really great. And I think hopefully it should be pretty easy to do now. So now, basically all that we have to do is we get the file here. And is this like a, oh, it doesn't know what file is, unfortunately. Oh, man. Rust Analyzer is so good that when it doesn't work, I'm very sad. But it's like every release, the things that weren't working are working, so I'm not sure why this particular thing doesn't work. But we can't see what file is. Another way to do this is the old-fashioned way, by saying it should be unit, and it's not. It is a zip file. Okay, so we're dealing with a zip file struct here. What we want to do is look at the file and get the extension on it. And for now, eventually we're going to actually care about these DLLs. We have to do something with these DLLs. But talking with the people who do this stuff, apparently the best thing to do is just literally look for all WinMD files. So anything that ends in WinMD, that's what we want. So we need a way to figure out if something is a WinMD file. And let's see what this zip file struct affords us. If we get something like an extension from it, we can get the name of the file. We don't want that necessarily. Name is a bit of a weird thing because the name isn't actually what it is. It's the path as a string. Sanitized name is good because that will give us a path buff, which gives us a whole bunch of things to work with. And then path buff gives us something like dot extension, I believe. Dot extension, and this is what we want. And then we can compare dot extension to to WinMD to see if it is a WinMD file. So that's what we want to do. Figure out, get all of our WinMD files together here. It is very tempting to write an iterator for this, but it's already a little bit. We got sidetracked by the redirects. If we didn't, maybe we could go about doing a little bit of yak shaving with that, but I don't know. Okay, so if our file dot sanitized name, was it right? Yep, sanitized name. Let's just do that. Like let path equal. And then we want to say if path dot extension equals, and maybe this can be compared to strings. I'm not sure though. Let's see. No, it cannot. Because it's an option. So we want to say, trying to think what's the nicest way to do this. we can map over it and get the extension and see if the extension is equal to WinMD, and otherwise unwrap. If it's not there, it will be false. And that works. So we get the extension. It's optionally not there because some files don't have extensions. We map over it, we get the extension and compare it to WinMD. And then if it is not equal, then we get false. Chat. There's a mention of native English. If I'm speaking too fast, then that is totally my fault. I apologize. Just let me know if I need to slow it down. I do have a tendency to ramble a bit, where I just speak very quickly. I apologize for that. So please just do let me know, and I will try to slow things down or explain things in multiple ways. I want to make sure that this is understandable for everybody. If let is also a possibility, but then you have to do two checks. You have to do an inner if then to check if the inner thing is equal to WinMD. You know what we could do? Another thing, if matches path.extension sum, then we have to get an OS string. Is this what we want? Will this work? I don't know if this is better or if this even works. Where is OS? Gotta find O. The reason that extensions are OS strings is because they are not necessarily UTF-8. They don't have to be UTF-8. And in fact, on some systems, they're definitely not UTF-8, but they're convertible. FFI, sorry. Standard FFI. And I always forget how to get an OS stir from a string. Oh, just new. No. No, that won't work. This should though. Yeah. Maybe this is better. This is the new matches macro, which does kind of pattern matching on the thing over here. And so we're patterned in saying if it is some E where the E is equal to WinMD, then this works. I don't know. We'll stick with this one. Okay. We have a WinMD file. And we want to do a to-do DLS because we have to take care of DLLs, which we haven't really talked about, but we definitely want to do that as well. Cool. Yeah, so basically what we want to do is collect together all of the WinMD files together. So what we could do here is say let mut WinMDs equals a new vector. And yeah, it's probably complaining it doesn't know what it is. That's fine. Then what we need to do is, and this is going to be interesting because I don't know how to actually read the data from this yet, so we need to figure that out as well. We have the files themselves, but we need their data, obviously. But we can at least get the file itself. So we can say winmds.push file. And we are, can we clone this file? No, zip file is not clone. It would be nice if we could just we are borrowing zip as mutable more than once as it iterates over it. Why are we borrowing it as mutable? That would be interesting to know. I'm not exactly sure why we're borrowing it as mutable in that case. Apparently byindex borrows it mutably. Why? For some reason, we are not here. Zip archive when we call this byindex. Interesting. When we call byindex, it is mutable, but it gives us ownership over a zip file, but it's tied to. So this is a good chance to understand not a super complex method signature here, but one that's not completely straightforward. So the lifetime of the borrow of self here, so for however long our zip archive is being borrowed for, is tied to the lifetime of a zip file itself. So presumably zip file is holding on to or has reference to memory inside of our zip archive. So it's important that we make sure that we can only hold on to zip files as long as the zip archive is still alive. Yeah. So I'm trying to think what the best way to do this would be. I mean, we certainly don't want to do this. Here the problem is that we are calling this by index, getting a mutable borrow, but we want to keep the mutable borrow around for as long as winmds is alive. But as we come around again in the loop, we'll borrow it mutably again, which is not what we want. So we basically can't hold on to these files past this this iteration here, which is a real shame. I think for now what we'll do is we'll just hold on to the index. That's kind of ugly, but we can do that real quick. So our winmds will hold on to the indexes that exist inside of the zip file. And my hope is that by index doesn't. Strange. I have no idea why this is a mutable reference here. Be interesting to see if inside the code if it's doing the reading kind of in seems like what it's doing is it's reading in kind of inline. So as we loop through them, we're reading more and more and more, which is a bit unfortunate. I think if what we do is we try and figure out what we're actually trying to do, which is get the real data. Interesting. Data start, getting the start offset of the data of the compressed file. And it implements read. So can we just read into? I'm interested to see what this is. Yeah, it seems like what we're allowed to do here with a zip file is call read on it, or use this read implementation here to read the contents of that file. And so we want to do something like this here. The same thing works with regular files, where we create a buffer and then we read into we call zip file.read and pass in that buffer, and it will read into that buffer. Let us do that instead. That seems a bit better. And so what I want to do now is, we need to keep the name alive as well. So path dot, we want to keep path is the full path. We really, the only thing that we care about is the last part of it, like the file name. And I forget how to get that. We want to go ahead and where is that? Do we have to get the last part? No. We can get the extension, file stem, there we go. And file name. Oh, it's on path. Okay, that's why. Cool. So we can just call file name on it. So this gives us the file name, and who's complaining about here? We need to. This is a bit ickier than I thought it was going to be. But we want to go ahead and say name is path.filename.into. I think we can say, where we say this is a path buff, which I don't think we have in scope. So path, by the way, path and path buff are two different things. Path buff is kind of like the akin to, it says it here, akin to string. And path is the akin to ampersand stir. So one is an owned entity and the other one is just a borrowed thing. Turns out there's not. So we need to turn this path into a path buff. I'm trying to remember. I think we can do two owned, probably. Yeah, that should. Because this is an option. We know this is really ugly. We know that it's there because of the above. Maybe we should turn this into a match now instead of doing the weird thing we were doing before. So back to this. If there is an extension, here is the extension. If the extension is equal to WinMD, this. This is an OS string now because the file name. Oh yeah, we don't want a path, we want an OS string. That's fine. Cool. So we were expecting, I was expecting a path earlier, but the file name is probably just is fine to be an OS string. Why would it be a path? It's just a file name. So now we have the file name. We can push the file name on, and we can read the contents. So let's say the contents of the file is this. I think there's something like file dot, is it file size? Would be nice to know this size of the, got too many things open here. Get the size of the file when uncompressed. That sounds good. Try that. So we're getting the file size when it's uncompressed. Then we can allocate a vector that is that capacity then, and then we can call file.read contents, and it seems that we need to have the read trait in scope. I just like to do it here. Oops. Otherwise, read won't be, in order for the read method to be available to us, we have to have its trait kind of in scope so that it knows about it. So now we're able to call read on this file, and now we have the contents. Let me just call this name. And we can't borrow file as mutable because we didn't say that it was. And we need another arm to this if it's not a, I mean, here we can probably just do, yeah. This is fine for now. Great. And if we can't read for some reason, if it doesn't work, let's blow up. Great. Okay, so now in these WinMDs, we have the name and the contents as a tuple. We probably want to make that a struct at some point. So it's a bit easier to reason about, but that's fine. And we get that for each dependency here. We have all of that information. So down in here, what we probably want to do then is write out those files. So again, we have the zipped or the WinMD files. We have their contents. What we want to do is write to the NuGet folder, the NuGet directory inside of our target directory, and create another directory inside of that has the same name as our dependency here, as our NuGet dependency. And inside of there, we write all of the WinMD files with the original names. And so the first thing that we want to do is to create a directory. So if you look in here, where is it? Standardfs. Don't think we need a dir builder. I always forget. Create dir, there it is. So the first thing that we want to do is create a directory. To create a directory and all of its missing parents at the same time, which is really what we want. We want to create dir all instead here. So this will create, if a parent of what we're making is missing, this will go ahead and create it. So we want to use something like this. So I'm going to stop for a second, real quick, before we go on. I feel like I'm rambling. Are there any questions or anything like that? Do things look good to people? I'll take the silence now as a yes, or it looks like the stream might actually be a little bit behind. Where you call to owned in the file name, does that make a copy? To owned, where was it at? Here. Yes, that creates a copy. The reason for that here is that this path is a standard path like this, or is it not? Oh, it is a path buff. I don't believe that path buff has a function that allows you. I just got rid of something that we need. Path buff doesn't have a function that allows you to kind of rip out the file name. I think we could do that if we like broke up the path into chunks and then got the last. Like there's a way to get your path and then break it up into each section of the path, and then we could just get the last one because we know that that's the file name. But I mean, it's fine. We're copying some data. That's totally cool. That's fine to do. We're doing a lot worse. Great. Okay, so in here now, what we want to do is to create the dependency directory. I cannot spell today. Oh man. And in order to do that, we call standard fs create your all and pass in a path. Now I'm going to assume for now that we are calling this from the root of the directory. We shouldn't make that decision always, but for now we're going to assume that we're at the root of the directory and that in that root of the directory is the target folder, just for now. And so what we can do is just say we should just be able to do path buff new, and this will be relative then. Dot join target. This is not the best way to do it, but it's fine for now. I'm gonna bring in. We're using path and path buff so much. Bring those into scope so we can use them. Great. So then we can unwrap here. So we'll just blow up if this creating that directory doesn't work. So we created our target. We will go into the target directory. We'll create NuGet. Hopefully that exists. And in fact, what we want to do is create a directory based on the name of the dependency. So join dep, and I think it was, underscore dep here. So the name of the dependency is going to be, for instance, whatever we were looking at, Win2D UWP here. That's the name. We will create a dependency based on that, a directory based on that name. That should work. And then once we have that, actually we should just take this path because we're going to need it again. Let dep directory, and we're going to create the dep directory, and then we're going to loop over the WinMDs Now we eventually probably want to just do this in line because we're kind of looping twice here, which is not really necessary. And this would be WinMD and name and contents. And so now we can do standard fs write in the dep directory dot join name with the contents and unwrap again. And we need to borrow this real quick because otherwise we can also just borrow this. Why not? Cool. So to repeat, we formed a path to our directory NuGet, name it the dependency directory. We create that directory and create any of its parents if they don't exist. Target might not exist. We might not have a target yet. NuGet might not exist, and of course the name of the dependency might not exist. So we create those, and then we loop over the WinMDs that we have. We have the name of that of the WinMD file, and we have the contents of the WinMD file, and we're just going to call write and write to the dep directory at that file name with those contents. Hopefully that makes sense. And this probably won't work, but I think that's everything that we need. So kind of the code is in place. Let's see if it works. Guess we don't need path. That's weird. Why? Sometimes I've seen that before where it just kills the running process. Invalid checksum. Is this happening when we're reading? Interesting. For some reason, we are getting an invalid checksum. I hope this is not happening for every file, and there's just some weird file that we're not forgetting to, let's see, name. There's a name here. Oh, that's an OS string, sorry. Yep, it's on the first file. Oh, that sucks, man. Invalid checksum, and I don't know why it would be an invalid checksum. I don't know. Let's see if they all error like that. I would be curious. Let's just do if let error. Print line. Could not read file. Let's see what happens if we do this. Seemed like it worked for none of the files. Okay. So all of the files, for some reason, have an invalid checksum. I'm wondering if... Now, I was told that NuGet files are just regular zip files. And as we can see, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this zip, I mean, I guess there's multiple versions of zip, but I'm wondering why that would be the case. Invalid check. There, check. We're not. This will be interesting. What is the compression method? Let's do... Because it could be that there is a compression method being used, isn't it called? Compression. There are compression methods that can be used that this crate doesn't support, I guess, and maybe that's what it is. And if that's the case, that's a bummer. Deflated, okay. Interesting. Trying to see. There is this file.bytes. But that should be from the reader, I believe, so I'm not exactly sure why this wouldn't work. That is a bummer. You know, where's bytes? That shouldn't be necessary. Hey everyone, Future Ryan here. So I did a little investigation after the end of the stream in order to try and find the source of the problem, and I ended up figuring out what the issue was. And I just wanted to quickly go over what the solution was so that we don't end on a cliffhanger because we won't be streaming this project anymore. So let's head over to the browser real quick and see what we found. So the way that I ended up actually finding the solution for this was in desperation, as I usually do. I go into the code of the dependency that I'm looking at, and I look at the examples to see what they're doing and how it's different from what I'm doing. So I went into zip RS. I went into examples, looked around to see something that looked like what we were doing, and extract seemed to fit the bill, and was blah, 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 looking around and seeing, okay, this looks somewhat similar-ish to what we were doing in the stream. And then I came down to where we were reading from the files and to see where they're doing the reading. And it turns out that on line 41 here, and let me pump this open, they're using IO copy. And what IO copy does is it reads from a reader and writes into a writer. And so the question that I had was, okay, well, maybe IO copy does work. So going back to the code, I went in here and went to the line where we're reading, and I changed it to IO copy instead. And just for demonstration purposes, notice over here in target that there's just this debug and rusty info.json file right here. And so if we go ahead and run our code again like this, we end up with, real quick while it's building, we end up with it working. And here's the NuGet folder, and here is the dependency name, and here is our WinMD file. So it actually ended up working, which is great. And I was a bit confused because my understanding was that what IO copy does is it reads from the reader and writes into the writer, and that's essentially what we were doing before. We were reading from the file and then writing into the contents. And then so I went back and was kind of looking around then and trying to figure out what the error was and why that was happening. So I went into docs.rs standard to take a look at IO copy here, and went into source to kind of look at the source file. And I mean, you don't really have to understand fully here because they're doing some stuff with maybe init and stuff like that. That's a little bit more advanced than what we're doing. But I was confused because it kind of looks the same as what we're doing. We're calling reader.read, passing in a writer or a buffer. But then I noticed, okay, this buffer is not the writer. So where is the writer? Oh, the writer's down here, and it's actually getting it from the buffer. And this was sort of the key that kind of tipped it off to me. The code as we had it before, if we go back and look what the code was before, oops, or actually we don't even have to go back and look at the code because the buffer is still there. Where was it? I've lost it now. Going up top here. This is our contents, the thing that we're writing into is this contents buffer here, right? And while we have it as a capacity, it is empty. When we call vec with capacity, it kind of allocates enough space on the stack, but the collection itself is empty. There's nothing that's there. And writing into those contents won't actually cause it to grow in size. It's simply growing. It's simply kind of feeding into the buffer as we go. And so we're sort of writing into it and not filling up the buffer fully. Turns out I wasn't the only one to discover this. We actually had somebody talking here as well, where I got thank you to Dr. Eman here for sending this pull request that kind of comes to the same conclusion. Read was reading into an empty slice, and instead we want read to end, and read to end takes this growable buffer instead of kind of an immutable buffer here. And will grow it if it doesn't have enough space. And so they went ahead and changed it to read to end and this is in a way sort of equivalent to our IO copy. or a lot more equivalent to our IO copy than this plain read was, because again, read will simply will only read into or place the contents of its read into the space that's allocated for it, and our contents buffer was empty, so there was no space for anything to go into it. Now, I agree with the pull request author here saying this is apparently a bug, and it turns out that there's kind of a bug already open here by Dr. Eman. So this, I believe this is the correct thing to do. Inside of here, they should do a check for empty buffers. I'm not exactly sure if this is completely correct or if there needs to be some sort of space. There needs to be some minimum space. I haven't looked at the code close enough, but overall, this is the right thing to do. So all we needed to do over here was switch to using IO copy, or some sort of variant that would be able to grow our contents vector as we needed it to. And of course, we need to fix this bug here where it should properly report the error if the buffer is empty. And that is it. We have the code working. There's a few adjustments that I need to make, but I don't think it makes an interesting enough stream. So that's going to be it for this series, this 2-video series. And I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you again. So make sure to follow me on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch, and you'll know when my next stream is coming up. Have a good weekend.